Welcome, everyone, to Indications and Warnings with Chuck PFARRER, co-produced by Alan BREWER. Chuck and I are recording this episode of Indications and Warnings on March 7, 2025. It is day 1108 of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. Let's start with overnight news, Chuck. A massive Russian air assault, almost 70 missiles, some apparently fired from the Black Sea, over 190 attack drones. I'm assuming this huge Russian attack is a direct result of the United States cutting off intelligence to Ukraine. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have a report coming out from Kyiv Post because it's edited and everything. It's likely to be within the next 48 hours. But the report was written within hours of the Washington announcing it was cutting off intelligence support. And you don't have to be a military genius to see the opportunity that presented to Russia for several things here. We have the overnight missile attack, which without American intelligence, Ukraine had little or no warning that this attack was going to come. And we also have corresponding Russian action on the Kursk salient. And again, if there is someone who sits in a position of power in Washington who had the power to do this, to blind Ukraine and take away from it one of its key and most important defensive assets, and that is timely American intelligence. So, unfortunately, this was predictable. Many civilians have been killed. This is one of the biggest missile attacks of the war, and sadly, this was going to happen. It was inevitable.
I would expect another battering from Russia overnight tonight in Kyiv. It's early evening in Kyiv right now, about 6:30 in the evening in Kyiv. But yesterday overnight, Odessa, Poltava, Chernihiv, Ternopil, all these regions of Ukraine struck, particularly the energy infrastructure. It's civilian infrastructure that Russia targeted overnight.
Yeah, we have missiles were also, as you pointed out, fired from the Black Sea. Several of the targets were in western Ukraine. Again, this was an infantile, impulsive decision from the executive branch of the United States. These were the consequences. Immediately, within seconds of him announcing this, the Russians made preparations to strike at the most delicious, wide open opportunity window of the entire war. To put a cherry on this doo-doo frosting, America watched this happen and didn't tell Ukraine. They watched these missiles, drones, naval platforms move into position to fire and didn't tell the Ukrainians. I want people to remember this. It's not like America pulled the plug and didn't know itself. They watched this happen. I don't know what to say.
To me,
I don't really know what to tell you.
It's unforgivable. I cannot think of another instance in American history where America has turned its back on an ally like Ukraine. I can't think of it. I know that we pulled out of Vietnam, we pulled out of Afghanistan, but to expose Ukraine as Trump has done, not only cutting off intelligence to Ukraine, but cutting off military supply, and we'll get to that as well. It's incomprehensible to me. It's just a vile policy decision that is costing Ukrainian lives in cities and on the front lines.
I can't think of any analogous situation in American military history where America denied critical battlefield intelligence to an ally, deliberately did so. Now, whether or not this decision was predicated, I'll use the word infantile again, predicated on some sort of tantrum, it doesn't remove the guilt, the shame, the negligence. It just doesn't do it. And again, I don't know of any analogous situation in American history where this happened, but I'd like to offer some solace to my former colleagues in the intelligence community, the men and women who work so hard to gather, collate, interpret, and prepare intelligence reports. They've prepared their reports, right? They knew this was going to happen. There's one person with release authority. So this comes onto the shoulders of one person. One person. And I noticed today the latest tweet that he's going to announce sanctions on Russia. No kidding. No kidding. You're going to punish Russia for being Russia? You opened the window, they stole the pie off the table, and you're going to blame them? They're like a dog. Of course they attacked. It's like, Alan, what do you say when you're on uncharted territory? You and I have been around a long time. We've seen a lot of presidents. Has anyone ever done this?
No. To the best of my knowledge, no. No American president in history has done anything like this. This is essentially, it would be the French fleet in the York River at the final battle of the American Revolutionary War. That French fleet pulling up anchor, turning around, and sailing back to France. That, to me, would be analogous. Of course, that did not happen.
Right, or merely sailing over the horizon and watching what happened. Well, unfortunately, this is where we are now.
And as I say, I expect the very same thing to happen tonight. And we have to remember that with every such massive attack, Russia learns something. They learn where Ukrainian weaknesses are, where seams in air defense are. We also know that Ukraine will now experience a shortage in Patriot missiles, quite likely, in other air defense systems. And this is why in the air last night, F-16s and French Mirage jets were scrambled by Ukraine. Of course, they're flown by Ukrainian pilots in air defense roles. They had no other choice.
Unfortunately, you're absolutely right. This is going to happen again tonight, and as we mentioned, it's 6. It's 6:45 there now. This is going to happen again tonight. The Russians are also going to take advantage on the battlefield. I expect more localized attacks and perhaps larger coordinated attacks as well. I don't know what point Washington was trying to make by handing a golden opportunity to Ukraine's enemy. I don't see how the cause of peace is advanced by facilitating one of the largest missile attacks of the war. I hope there are people in the White House press room. If anyone is and you're listening to us, please ask a pointed question. Just ask how is the cause of peace advanced by last night? And let's just put it the way it is, tonight's attack too.
Yeah.
How does that change tomorrow morning?
And again, Donald Trump, the peacemaker, this doesn't bring peace any closer. he has spent most of his energy beating down Ukraine, supposedly in an effort to bring Ukraine into peace negotiations, unwilling even to acknowledge that Ukraine is the victim here. He's not only belittling the victim, but battering it in an effort to get Ukraine to the negotiating table. Now, the cutting off of military supplies, Trump says, will last until peace negotiations begin. Doesn't that put the time schedule into Putin's hands, not into Zelensky's hands?
Well, it certainly does. And interestingly, it isn't Russian military supplies that the president is interdicting. It is Ukrainian military supplies. It isn't Russian intelligence that's been frustrated, denied, and interfered with. It's Ukrainian. General Kellogg, who, a man I still admire, I understand the dilemma that he faces every day doing the job he does for the person he does it for. He put it in a pretty folksy way, which I think maybe we can all understand, and that pulling the plug on Ukrainian intelligence, General Kellogg decided, was trying to get the attention of a mule by hitting it in the face with a 2x4. Those are his words. Anyone who thinks it's a good idea to hit a mule in the face with a 2x4, you make your judgment on whether or not he used the right metaphor, and I think he did. Vicious, uncalled for, abusive, a felony in most states, I'm pretty sure. And even in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, you cannot abuse a public animal. It's right in there, folks. You could look it up. President, floating around the decision here is that this is to concentrate Ukraine's intelligence, concentrate Ukraine's attention on peace negotiations. Ukraine needs to be concentrated on defending itself, right? Wow.
Yeah.
200 years from now, I hope someone finds this tape and listens to it so they can understand the confusion of two gentlemen who've been following this war for what, 3 years now, Alan. We've been working together. Mm-hmm. The biggest part of our day, every day, is Ukraine.
Yes, it is.
And we can't make heads or tail out of it.
No, we can't. I will point out that cutting off military supply to Ukraine included not unloading planes on the ground in Poland. These are military cargo planes loaded with military supplies. Actually turning cargo planes around and sending them back to base rather than on to their destination in Poland. These are supplies that Ukraine desperately needs. It's not that weapons shortages and shell shortages or Patriot missile shortages are going to show up today or tomorrow, but you immediately have Ukrainian target officers knowing they have to conserve the ammunition they have. That puts terrible psychological pressure on them.
It really does. And we have seen that part of Ukraine's defensive calculus, because they are still in a defensive posture in this war, and they will continue to trade disadvantageous terrain for time. As we saw, for example, in the Russian salient across the Zarabets River, something's got to give. When you have to prioritize and triage every artillery target, something's got to give, right? So we see Russian advances for around Velika Novosilka and other places because, the material, the ammunition just isn't there to beat off every single attack. That, however, being said, Russian losses are still above 1,000 a day, even though their attack numbers have gone down.
Yep.
And there are several places we'll report on during this report where Ukraine is actually advancing. So this desperate balancing act goes on, but Washington has put its thumb on the scale and not in favor of Ukraine.
No, this also has given rise to discussion in Europe. Is it possible to clamp down I'll call it a no-fly zone over Ukraine? It would be called Operation Sky Shield. About 120 fighter jets from a variety of European nations, essentially to protect Western Ukraine, or roughly west of the Dnipro River, west of Kyiv. Would be a European mission to protect cities like Kyiv, Odessa, Lviv, in the far west, and 4 of the 5 nuclear power plants that are operated inside Ukraine would do nothing to protect the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, which has been occupied by Russian forces. How, as this is in the discussion stage, and discussions, of course, always take too long, but how quickly could such an air mission be undertaken by European nations?
Well, there are contingency plans. Every, as you become a major, you go depending on to or not, you spend a lot of your time working on contingency plans. So there are plans for, it's almost a cookie cutter. Here's the plan. We're going to need this many tankers, this many AWACS, this many fighters. They're going to need their logistics, their armament, their avionics. They're going to need bases to operate out of, on and on and on. So that plan is about, I don't know, it is about this thick, maybe even 3 binders that are that thick. You do a lot of joint exercises where you kind of practice doing these things. How long does it take? That is the biggest portion of that input. Is it's a political decision, because if your, National Command Authority says make it happen, you say aye aye. You don't say, hey, wait a minute. You make it happen. So there needs to be the political will. There is a chance now that Washington has concentrated European attention. Putin runs the risk, if there is another assault tonight, and it is significantly outrageous to Europe, they may move forward quickly. But as you said, I think it's likely that if there is a sky shield, it will be to the west of the Dnipro. There is an incredible amount of suffering that still goes on in Kherson, in
Odessa,
Kupiansk, Odessa, Kramatorsk, everywhere that they can reach. So we'll really have to see. And again, I don't know if you're advancing the cause of peace when you are now injecting NATO forces actually into the conflict, right? There seems to be a bunch of goals here, and they seem a bit scattershot, right? You need a laser. You don't need a 12 gauge with birdshot, right? You need a laser.
And these are, if you look at, well, you can't figure out what the Trump administration is doing. You cannot figure out what Trump is doing. Apparently, he now carries a vendetta against Zelensky. Reports, apparently true, of Trump administration advisors and insiders actually being in secret contact with potential opponents of Zelensky in any coming election in Ukraine. So the regime change that Trump wants is in Ukraine, not in the Kremlin. This is completely wrong-headed. If I could do it, Chuck, I would pick my head up off my shoulders and turn around and point it that way. Might be a little too shocking for our viewers, but this is what I mean. Trump makes my head spin. There's absolutely no way to defend or make a reasonable judgment of what Trump is doing.
And our longtime listeners will know, look, I do everything possible to stay out of domestic politics, right? Because we're a show about Ukraine. I'm one of those guys who thinks, look, my own political opinions, they don't matter to anybody. I don't try to convince people at cocktail parties to come around to my manner of speaking. Whenever I speak of the president, I try to do so as the commander in chief, because I'm not qualified to talk about anyone's politics. I am qualified, I think, to talk about military affairs, geopolitical affairs, counterterrorism, and gray zone operations. That's me. I don't get it. And I don't want to sort of, if I do try to make sense of this, I don't want anyone to think that I am trying to justify. I'm not trying to get you to change your opinions about what you're seeing with your own eyes. I'm not trying to get you to do that. I kept thinking that there would be a purpose to these outrageous stunts, that they would be designed to focus everyone's attention and somehow convince the concerned parties that now is the time, we mean it, this is what, okay. And again, please don't think I'm trying to justify these outrageous breaches of logic. I just don't know what to say. And especially, it really hurts me to think 3 days ago, I said, he's opening a window. The Russians are going to have a field day. And they did.
Yeah.
There was a time lag between, when I do something and when it comes out. I mean, so it is the intervening moment. But you and I talked about this yesterday.
Yeah. Look, it's not too fine a point to put on it, Chuck. Essentially, what Trump has done is threaten Ukraine in order to conclude a minerals agreement. Now, Ukrainian civilians actually have been killed as a result. Next week, Zelensky is going to be in Saudi Arabia, and Trump officials will also be in Saudi Arabia. Apparently, on Tuesday, Ukraine and U.S. officials will meet not only to get to the end of the minerals deal, but my God, they've got to hammer out their differences here. Someone has to explain to Trump the cost of his decisions. And to the world, it looks like Donald Trump is working for Vladimir Putin. That's what it looks like.
I can see how anyone who has come to that conclusion, I can see why you arrived there. Personally, I actually don't think that's true. But again, I would not try to talk anyone out of being convinced that that's the case. There is evidence, ample evidence right before your eyes. I tend to think this is a person who is very, very different from you or me. This is a guy who was born rounding third base, right? He has gotten everything he has ever wanted in his entire life handed to him. And he can fire anyone he wants to because there are tens of thousands of sycophants in orbit who would do anything to be close to him. Abraham Lincoln, this is not.
No.
Okay? This is not a kid who had to burn a tallow candle to teach himself how to read in a log cabin. All right? This is a completely different person. Peace to me, now I'm not fighting this war, right? My buttons have never been in the dirt in Ukraine. Peace to me is not as important as lasting security. That's what's important, not peace. Peace with Russia, they've already signed numerous agreements about Ukraine's security, prosperity, economics, military security. They violated every single one of them. What's different now? So what we might see, hopefully, I don't know, Mr. Trump has threatened massive economic sanctions against Russia, etc. Tariffs that really takes Canada off the hook, right? 25% tariffs on Canada, and there are no tariffs on Russian goods. I can see why some people have come to conclusions that they've reached, but there's so much that Uncle Sam could do that Uncle Sam is not doing, and that needs to change.
It does need to change, and someone also needs to tell Donald Trump the history of Russia violating agreements for the last 30 odd years. Let me remind everyone, Russia signed the Budapest Memorandum in 1994. So did the United States. The United States hasn't upheld its part of the Budapest Memorandum. In 1996, Russia, it was then Russia, it wasn't the Soviet Union, signed a Russian-Ukrainian friendship treaty in which Russia agreed to respect Ukraine's sovereignty and never to use force against Ukraine. That was in 1996. In 2014, of course, Russia illegally annexed Crimea and set up fake people's republics, supposedly led by Ukrainian separatists in Luhansk and Donetsk. This is the Donbass. We now know that those people's republics were created by Russian special forces, the very same special forces, the little green men who invaded Crimea. And, Chuck, we also know that in 2014, and, this war has been going on since 2014. It's not a 1,000-day war. It is an 11-year war now. And one of the very first battlefield agreements that Russia broke in 2014, the Ilovaisk Green Corridor, this was in the Donbass. The town of Ilovaisk had been surrounded by Russian forces, and Russian commanders on the field agreed to a green corridor. That is safe evacuation of both civilians and soldiers. But what did Russia do? They fired on the green corridor and they killed 366 Ukrainians whose safety and lives had been guaranteed just a few hours before.
Yeah, and the word ceasefire to me, it means nothing. In my career abroad, and particularly in the peacekeeping assignments I've been in, I have literally experienced ceasefires that lasted 30 seconds. I have experienced ceasefires where the shooting started 20 minutes before it was supposed to go on and then continued for a week. It means nothing to me. You were in one place you were more likely to die during a ceasefire than you were when the gloves came off. And especially, no coincidence that many of these little things I was involved in, the sponsoring power was the Soviet Union, right? It was the Soviet Union that was pulling the puppet strings of these ceasefire violations all over the world. And remember, ceasefire is simply that: stop shooting, right? It's not an armistice. It's not a truce agreement. It's not a negotiation settlement. It's a suspension of trigger pulling. So, there's no way that anyone should rush into peace negotiations with a power that has such a long history of unreliability, duplicity, mendacity, lies. So I don't know.
And a history of breaking ceasefires. There were 20 ceasefires in the Donbass as a result of Minsk agreements. The Minsk talks involved 200 rounds of talks between Ukraine and Russia, 20 ceasefires. Russia broke every single one of them. Now Russia is saying they will not accept any NATO troops in a peacekeeping force that would be deployed to Ukraine to keep a ceasefire or to keep peace. Russia regards that as NATO aggression to see such a peacekeeping force on the ground in Ukraine. So you're already at a point of negotiations that are so thorny, they will be discussed for weeks, for months, who knows how long.
You know, there are a couple of generals that we've talked to over the years, and I am sure if we put one bourbon into General Kellogg's hand and one bourbon into General Hodges' hands, they would say off the record, it's time to start telling Russia what to do.
Yeah.
Don't tell me there's not going to be peacekeepers in a war you started and are losing. And if you think you don't like fighting Ukraine with NATO support, you're not going to like fighting NATO. You're not up to it. You are not up to it. So again, and I don't expect General Hodges or General Kellogg to say those things in public, but I am certain that is the way they feel. And if you disagree, Alan, just,
No, I'd love to get those bourbons in the hands of General Kellogg and General Hodges. I think Kellogg might need two bourbons.
He might need two. He's a crusty guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, he's out there pretty much spouting the Trump line. But at this point, because of everything that Trump has decided to do to injure Ukraine as an effort to force them into negotiations, it is tantamount to Trump pushing Ukraine to surrender. And that is really what Trump's decisions it would never happen. I don't think that Ukraine would ever surrender, believe me. But if they were ever pushed so far, it would be a surrender, and Trump will call it peace. It would be no such thing. No such thing. We are going to go to some places on the zero line, Chuck, where Ukraine is winning. That's the other thing that makes the timing of Trump's decisions so damned odd, because Ukraine is doing so well on the zero line. Russian attacks dwindling. Their move forward has fallen to next to nothing. I mean, we talked about the investment they had to make to take a single square kilometer a few months ago in their grinding attacks. Hundreds and hundreds of Russian and North Korean soldiers invested to take a square kilometer of land. Well, they're not even moving forward in such a way to take half a square kilometer of land at the moment, Chuck. And this is, I think, even, and we'll go first to Kremina with maps from March 3 and March 4. But even in Kremina, where the Russians are attempting to enlarge a salient on the west bank of the Zarabets River and the Zarabets Reservoir, they are investing thousands of troops here in Kremina, and I'm not sure what they're going to show for it.
Yeah, they have expanded a lodgment on west of the Zarabets River in the northern portion of the Zarabets Reservoir. And this is terrain you and I have in our heads. We have this. In the SEALs, it was map study. You didn't go into the field unless you know, as you do in your head, exactly what all the terrain looks like. They have expended lots of blood and treasure, and they have gained a patchy swampland overlooked by a bunch of bluffs, right? It wasn't the place that if you looked at this map and said, I have X Russian commander, I have X number of resources, vehicles, men, ammunition, I'm going to do the most I possibly can with this force. It wouldn't be attacking north of the Zerbets River. It doesn't go anywhere. There's no debauchement. There's no exit from this area. So a couple of things happen though. Ukraine looks at this map and they say, we are resource constrained. We have ammunition problems. I've got to triage every Russian attack. What do I have to lose here, or here? The decision was consciously made by Ukrainian commanders. Look, if I have to give them something, I'm going to give them the swampland north of the Zerbets Reservoir. And that is what they've done. Again, as we've said a million times, and our longtime listeners know this, look, at every point of attack and overall, the Russian superiority in this area is 4-5. It has been as high as 10-1. And everywhere at the point of attack, Russian forces generally outnumber the Ukrainian defenders. And that was manageable when you had a dependable flow of overhead imagery, signals intelligence from the United States. That allowed Ukrainian commanders to concentrate their force at the point of attack and then break them up and reconstitute them at the different points of attack. So, is the stage set for more advances in Crimea? I don't think so, because historically, Alan, as you know, these guys are the underachievers of the Russian invasion up here around Crimea.
And the Ukrainians around Crimea are among the Ukrainian overachievers, really having run a great defensive operation here for hundreds of
couple of years.
Days now. Just talking about the intelligence shutdown by Trump, that also affects how Ukraine uses weapon systems like HIMARS. Because if you shut down the intelligence, it means you're not getting the firing coordinates that you need, right? Am I wrong about that?
You're essentially right. You are there, and especially the HIMARS systems. There are integrated information systems, battlefield surveillance systems. I won't get into it. And a lot of it's classified. That allow the HIMARS batteries, which are highly mobile, longer range, extremely accurate. You can see what an asset this is on the battlefield. And in a perfect world, these HIMARS batteries can shoot and scoot. You can give them a target, they can get into firing position, they can let it rip, and then they can get out of there before counter battery things can find them. It's a little more complicated than this, but what they need is an 8-digit grid coordinates. And that is basically that can tell the front of your house from the back of your house. And when you're dealing with a 250-pound warhead, that's a bit moot. So, they're not getting what they need. And the other thing is, those HIMARS rounds, they're finite now because the supplies have been cut off. It's really unfathomable. I'm going to try to channel my inner Andrew Mueller here and not be outraged, but it's very hard to understand. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. It's like being a second in a duel, maybe between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, and walking up to Hamilton and saying, "I'm going to need that gun."
Or even worse, put this blindfold on.
Well, that's essentially what has happened to Ukrainians on the zero line. On HIMARS, for example, they're shooting in the dark without intelligence, without the coordinates they need. And we've seen how effective Ukrainians have been with HIMARS, not only striking concentration of Russian forces, but striking Russian command posts, fuel and ammunition depots behind the zero line. I mean, HIMARS was a great equalizer when it went into battle for Ukraine.
Absolutely. Now, for example, what happened in this window? Trump announces he's going to cut off the intelligence feed. The Russians confirmed that that in fact did happen, right? So you've got some bright Russian officer, and he rightly pointed out to his boss, look, we can take forces that are 20, 30, 40 miles off the zero line. We can do something we've never been able to do before. We can concentrate these forces, get them on the road, get them to the jump off point, and hit the Ukrainians, because right now, no American satellites are looking at us, or actually they are, they're watching it. But I hate to say this and let this rattle in your head. We can count on Washington not reporting our preparations for this attack. Stunning. But they took advantage of it, and especially in Kursk Oblast. That was something that the Russians were not able to do, and we have been banging on for the last 3 years saying Russia will never surprise Ukraine on the battlefield in this war, not assuming that America would allow that to happen. So that's how important this intelligence was. When I heard the pause in the weapons, I just thought, look, the supply chain is a slinky, right? You can say, I'm stopping it now, but stuff's in the pipeline. They cut the pipeline. But when I heard intelligence was being suspended, I just knew it was a catastrophe.
Yeah, it is a catastrophe. And I think people really need to pay attention to what Chuck is saying here. It blinds Ukraine. And secondly, the Russians have done and are probably doing today, will do as long as intelligence sharing is cut off. This gives Russians the freedom to reposition troops, to concentrate forces, exactly as Chuck said. And this is a direct result of a decision that Donald Trump made, apparently because he has a vendetta against Zelensky. I have no idea. But there is no war logic, battlefield logic, or alliance logic underpinning such a decision. There's no way to justify it. None whatsoever.
No, there isn't. So not only are there going to be, tactical consequences on the zero line, unfortunately, there are civilian consequences. Because, remember, look, there is no equivalency in Ukraine's deep strikes against Russia and Russia's deep strikes against Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't have the long-range platforms to waste on terror attacks. They don't hit civilian areas for no reason for the purposes of terror. They hit air bases. They hit arsenals. They hit weapons depots. They hit oil refineries. There is no equivalency in a Ukrainian large-scale strike operation and last night. And still that number holds, and it's never coming down in this war. 95% of Russian precision strike munitions hit civilians. Mm-hmm. Period. That's it. Yep. So, wow. I just who saw this happening?
And actually,
even,
go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, but even if you wanted the outrage and you wanted to say it and you wanted the world to know you were meaning business, I'm going to suspend intelligence support for Ukraine. It's one thing to say it. It's another thing to actually do it. And I just wanted to remind people that there are tens of thousands of Americans who work so hard every day to make sure that last night can't happen to Ukraine. One person decided tonight's the night, we're going to let it happen to Ukraine. Put that on your desk. Imagine you signed that. See, it's with a background in clinical psychology, it's hard for me to let those comments just pass, right? I want everyone to, it's a different sort of person than everyone else.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to think I wouldn't sign such a pass
No,
for the Russians. You know, obviously there's someone in the line of command who will pick up the pen and sign it, but I wouldn't want it to be me. Uh,
no.
and it's actually in the Kremina area, Chuck, because Russian forces have such a number advantage over Ukraine. It might well be in Kremina that Russia uses this newfound freedom to concentrate forces in a way they haven't been able to uh, in months and months and months. That's certainly what they did in Kursk, by the way.
Absolutely. It certainly can happen. And there's this dangerous confluence. You're not permitting Ukraine to get tackle intelligence, like what's going on in the zero line and what indications and warnings do we have for things that are going to occur in ground combat. Then there is strategic reconnaissance. Engels 2 Air Base has now hosting, 14 Tu-95s. That's strategic intelligence, right? Now would be the time to hit Engels 2. You deprive Ukraine of that. One of the most important things you can have in sort of conducting a war, planning a war, defensive war, offensive actions. And now you couple that with the only ammunition you have is what's in Ukraine now. That's it. You're not getting any more. So now you're counting bullets. You're fighting blind and you're counting bullets. You can't win like that. So I'd like to unravel these things. The actions that have just been taken from Washington are basically saying and forcing Ukraine. They've told them this: we're going to make sure you can't win this war anymore. We're going to make sure you can't fight it. So you're going to have to come to the negotiation table. Look, the responsibility for last night lies with Washington, right? It lies with the commander in chief. He made that happen. I don't know what point you're trying to make there. Someone breaks into your house, Alan, and starts living in your living room and your bedroom and selling your furniture. And I say to you, I'm going to blindfold you and handcuff you. And if you don't give that guy some of your furniture, I'm not going to help you.
Yeah. It's
my brain's on fire.
You just can't find the words to talk about what Donald Trump has done and is doing to Ukraine, all in an effort to apparently get a minerals deal signed. And again, what Trump is going to call peace to make himself into a peacemaker is not going to be a peace. It's just not going to be. It's not going to, without security guarantees, and that would have to involve European forces. I mean, and again, America has already said through Donald Trump, no, we're not going to be part of a peacekeeping force. It's just, what set America apart in its history. We became a nation that the people of the world, that nations of the world, that newborn democracies of the world looked up to, not because America was perfect, but because America gave them an example of what they could become through democracy, freedom, and following the rules. Trump has blown up 80 years of relative peace and security, not only for the United States but for the world's democracies. He's done that in part by stabbing Ukraine in the back.
Well, it's hard not to look to the history of the 20th century and put it in the 21st century. And in particular, in the 1930s, with the Spanish Civil War, which fascist nations intervened in, where war fighting changed in a generationally changed. World War II had to adapt to that change. And that led, of course, the Spanish Civil War. We're in a period now in 2025, analogous in my mind to the Spanish Civil War. The tactics of warfare have changed fundamentally. And I see this as the opening act. We're at this decision point in history here. I'm very pessimistic about any negotiated settlement with Putin. He simply won't honor it. And that means that he has to be thwarted from continuing this sort of conduct. And I am certain that the Baltics are on his menu. Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, they're on his menu. He isn't going to quit expanding. This is a zero-sum game to him. Ukraine's future and its future security depend on NATO. And that means the United States. We've got to do something. And I guess it was Churchill who said the United States will always do the right thing after they've tried everything else. I wish that were still true, Mr. Churchill. And I wish you were here, by the way.
I wish it were still true. Apparently, Churchill never did actually say that, but it's very Churchillian.
It's very Churchillian.
Yeah, most of the things Churchill is credited with saying were either said by someone else or invented. But if you put it in the mouth of Churchill, it carries extra weight.
Sure. Yeah.
Look, we're going to go to a place on the zero line where Ukraine is having great success in rolling back Russian forces. This is in Toretsk. Russia had occupied this small city. It's south of Chasiv Yar, south of Bakhmut, and Ukraine has re-entered the city center of Toretsk. The fighting's intense, but Russians are retreating here. This is what I meant when I said the timing of Trump's decisions to withhold intelligence and military supplies from Ukraine these decisions were made at the very time when Ukraine was showing great success on the zero line. I think they still are showing great success in Toretsk, Chuck.
Yeah, they have managed to push back against the Russians in a couple of areas. You can see the little how the line sort of makes a little trident. This is some tough urban fighting, and I think you'll see that Ukraine is trying to use open terrain around built-up areas and sort of cut these Russian holdings off. The thing to remember, of course, in urban fighting, it's not two-dimensional; it's three-dimensional. You've got buildings; they have multiple floors. The best way to take a building is from the top. You don't want to fight your way upstairs. All you need to do is go upstairs today, throw a tennis ball down the stairs, and remember that's a hand grenade. You don't want to fight that. And also remember, it's going to be an indicator of Russian combat effectiveness, because if you get into a city and you're there first, your defensive power is much greater. Whoever gets to that sort of terrain first has really got, most of the points on the board already. So this is some tough fighting. And the fact that Russia is giving way here, it tells me that, look, Russian combat effectiveness is low, right? Their morale is bad. That comes down to the individual commitment of an individual soldier, right? It affects their courage, their combat applications, their willingness to, I don't want to say die, nobody wants to die, but their willingness to fight. So Alan is right that, Russia is not getting stronger on the battlefield. It's getting weaker every day, which may be one of the reasons that General Kellogg pointed out that Washington decided to hit the mule in the mouth with a 2x4. You can draw conclusions if you're Ukrainian that, look, we don't need peace negotiations. Russia is flailing itself to pieces. And Toretsk is one of those places on the battlefield where, look, you look at that data and Ukraine is doing well. And remember, they always have less than the Russians, less vehicles, less ammunition, less troops. That's why those force multipliers, intelligence and American precision strike munitions, force multipliers that Ukraine depended upon.
In urban warfare, as you were just saying, Chuck, you don't want to fight from the first floor to the top floor. And this is where HIMARS often come into play. Rather than fight for a stronghold in the center of a city at all, just blow it the hell up. Then you don't have to fight for it. You've taken care of it if it has been used as a stronghold in urban warfare.
Yeah, absolutely. And weapons that Ukraine now has to ration, for example, JDAM extended range. This is a guided aerial bomb that is so maneuverable, you can actually call it in and hit whatever side of the building you want. So generally your close air support is flying, behind you to in front of you, but these weapons you can say strike the east side of the building and the weapon itself can fly in a big circle and come in. And these are the sort of weapons that should be in adequate, if not unlimited supply for Ukraine. And again, we're at a point lacking intelligence and lacking bullets. Not a good place to be.
No, and Ukraine is actually forcing Russian retreats here in Toretsk. I think that they are actually moving into the city quite cautiously, but there are a number of Russian forces that are at risk of being surrounded to the west of Toretsk. So it's also possible that they have already been surrounded and surrendered. There are increasing Russian surrenders from Toretsk. On any other day, Chuck, you would look at what Ukraine is accomplishing in Toretsk, and you would feel so good about it. Now, everything that they are accomplishing is being called into question. Can they sustain it? Because Donald Trump has taken away military supply and intelligence. So now the question is, can Ukraine sustain the success they've been having in the last week?
I think that they will. I think that the intelligence is going to get turned back on. And again, I think cooler heads are going to prevail there. I hope. Weapon supplies are going to have to resume. Again, that's an aspiration at this point. But one thing that is a negative trend for the Russians that is not going to reverse is that their combat effectiveness is going to continue to approach zero. I saw a video of a debrief of a Russian soldier today. He was captured in Toretsk. He said that he had been a prisoner in jail somewhere in Russia. They stopped feeding him until he signed a contract to go to Ukraine. 3 weeks later, he was on the zero line with a AK pattern rifle and 3 magazines. They sent him to the front, no food, no water. He had never fed and never got any water, and now he's a prisoner of war. Okay, that is the standard of Russian soldiers for at least 40% of their army. That's the standard. Now, he's pretty much just a civilian. And I'd say this to our listeners. Try to imagine if I gathered you and 10 of your friends, gave you 90 bullets with a rifle you don't even know how to work, and I pointed to an apartment building in Toretsk, and I said, get the Ukrainians out of that building. Would you know what to do? Do you think you'd stand a chance against me and 14 of my SEAL friends in that building? No, you wouldn't. And that's what I mean about combat effectiveness. That's not winning. That's not even worth doing in any other army anywhere in the world, to take a guy out of the county jail, give him a rifle, and send him to the front. There's no reason to do that, right? It's not military effect. Russia has to do it. That's how bad it is for them. And anyway, I'd like to bring it back to that, because that's my assessment, honestly, of their army.
And it's a clear example of the manpower challenges that Russia is having. And Russia is having manpower challenges on the front line, especially on the zero line in Ukraine. Of course, they have the help of North Korean troops in Kursk, but Toretsk is one of the very places where Russian commanders have complained about not having sufficient numbers of soldiers and not having supplies, by the way. So a trusted ally, looking at such information from Toretsk, or where we're going next in Pokrovsk, a trusted ally would say to Ukraine, here, have some more of what you need so you can win these battles in short order. And congratulations, by the way, rolling Russians back in Toretsk and in Pokrovsk. It's always been in Pokrovsk that I've concentrated my attention, expecting Russian forces to fall back from the Ukrainian counterattacks. Again, Russia has tremendous logistical problems here in Pokrovsk. And when we look at the map from March 5th, Chuck, Ukraine has really solidified its defensive lines south of Pokrovsk, west of Pokrovsk, southwest down in Kutury, alternately called Kotlini, I've learned. But in Kutury, Ukrainian forces are pushing Russians back. A pretty important development for Ukraine to continually defend Pokrovsk.
Yeah, it is. It is here where, again, we're looking at the combat inefficiencies of our forces. You know, Pokrovsk is sort of the culmination of Russian offensive action since they took Avdiivka, which, by the way, it took them close to 10, I don't know, it took 9.5 years to take Avdiivka. Thereafter, there was some non-optimal Ukrainian planning. There was not much thought given to defense in depth. And before we just point a finger and blame some Ukrainian general for not preparing 20, 30, 40 kilometers of defensive works in his rear, what engineering forces did he have available? I mean, did he have bulldozers? Did he have enough gas? There's workable defensive positions don't drop out of the freaking sky. And every infantryman knows, you got to dig your own a lot. And even just the food, the sweat, the shovels. I mean, right. So I'm not going to just blame that guy. But what I will say is, look, this is a priority target, and Alan watches this very carefully. This is very likely the center of gravity of Russian military activity in the entire nation of Ukraine. and they still haven't taken it. And I know I go back to banging that drum, but I want you to think of that clown in that county jail, right? Zero training. Throw him into an urban battlefield. Zero training. Throw him into an infantry assault. I like to refer this back to, to civilian listeners. You're right to be afraid, to realize you wouldn't know what to do. You don't have an idea what to do. You shouldn't have. You were a civilian.
Right.
Right. And here's the other thing. They're starving people in county jails to get them to go to the front, because signing a military contract in Russia, you might as well sign up for pancreatic cancer. You're not gonna survive.
Yeah.
You won't live. So 1 million casualties, Alan, 350,000 dead, 750,000 wounded. Remember, the initial invasions of force was 400,000 people.
Yeah.
It's been wiped out twice. Okay, they're not going to win. Here's the thing. Russia's still not going to win. We don't need to make it harder on Ukraine to defeat Russia.
Exactly. So, inexplicable decisions being made by the Trump administration. We hope that he changes his mind just as quickly as possible. There are Republican senators who are dismayed and have spoken out about it and are reaching out to Trump to get him to reverse these decisions. What other action they might be able to take, I have no idea. None whatsoever.
I would hope, since the stick is being used instead of the carrot, maybe a little more stick on Moscow, right? More cowbell. How about a little more cowbell for Moscow?
Yeah.
We'll see. Maybe it'll happen. I don't know.
I don't know either. And it could happen at any moment. That is how chaotic decision making in the Trump administration is, both to impose tariffs, then take tariffs off. Of course, we're talking about the tariffs being imposed on our friends and allies, Canada and Mexico. Look, it's chaos. It's chaos in a nation that used to be pretty reliable for order, but we don't have that anymore in this administration. We all bets are off. That's all I can say. All bets are off as long as Donald Trump is president.
Yeah, and again, I don't want anyone to think I'm not trying to get you to change your assessment of what's going on. I'm absolutely not. People can come to their own political and personal decisions about this. There is a bit of irony in this for me, because previously the axis of evil, America's enemies in the world, they thrive on chaos. And especially the Iranians, who have now essentially been put back in their box. But I wrote a lot of papers on this. No one's ever going to read. They were classified. But it was Iranian foreign policy and the intermediate state of chaos. They had national policy objectives, and en route to achieving them, they would pave that progress with chaos. Just create chaos everywhere else, and eventually maybe you'll get what you want. They use that in Syria, Lebanon, in Yemen, all over the world. I mean, so this was something that was actually given thought to. What's ironic to me is now America's adversaries, and unfortunately allies as well, they are facing chaos as well. The unpredictability, the unfathomable actions are now being fostered by the United States. And again, look, I'm not trying to justify anything. I'm more of a steady course kind of guy. I'm more of an incrementalist. But now the shoe's on the other foot.
Elsewhere on the zero line in Chasiv Yar, Ukraine also having success against Russian forces. I think it was in Chasiv Yar just yesterday that Ukraine destroyed another Russian armored column, such as it was. I mean, Russia really has in some places an inadequate supply of armored vehicles now. And if they didn't have an inadequate supply in Chasiv Yar, they do now, because Ukraine destroyed a tank and 4 or 5 armored infantry fighting vehicles, all in one go.
All in one go. And this often happens. And this is, again, we get back to Russian combat inefficiency. Every time Russia attacks, they lose between 35 and 90% of the attacking force. It simply happens. Yet they continue either these. So this attack was essentially platoon or company sized, right? It wasn't a really big one like up in Kupiansk recently. But this force was engaged and stopped and wiped out by the Ukrainians. There was a time 2.5 years ago where Russia should have called a halt to everything, a safety timeout, and said, let's examine our tactics because they're really not working. They're still not working. But put yourself in the shoes of a Russian commander. You have plans, you have aspirations, you have dreams, you have tactical objectives. You've got the worst equipment in the world. You've got guys that just got out of the county jail where they lost 35 pounds. They don't even know how to change the magazine on their rifle. You give this guy a compass, he's like a hog looking at a wristwatch. You don't have soldiers. You've got this. And this is what I mean. I want people to scale this up. Look, this is stand-up comedy, but it's true. They are never going to get to the Dnipro. It's never going to happen. So, unfortunately, with what's coming out of Washington, Ukraine's going to have to make some decisions. They're going to have to trade some dirt for time. But their army isn't getting better, Alan. It's never going to get better. Their commanders are never going to get smarter. Their gear's never going to get better. Their armored personnel carriers, 7.62 bullet will go right through it. The
other thing we're seeing on the Russian side of the zero line is kind of a patchwork of assault vehicles available. So we mentioned the armored column up in Chasiv Yar that was destroyed yesterday by Ukrainian forces. Down in Pokrovsk, you're not seeing tanks and BMPs. You are seeing Chinese dune buggies, bicycles, motorcycles, mules and donkeys, and Russian soldiers simply walking to the zero line, getting to a point on the zero line in any way that they possibly can. Now, to my way of thinking, this probably leads to more Russian surrenders. You don't want to be dropped 10 kilometers from the zero line because Ukraine has saturated the air around Pokrovsk with so many drones. You can't get any closer. You're on your own to actually get to your position and engage with Ukrainian forces. So why bother to do that? There was one Ukrainian soldier that took 6 Russian soldiers captive just the other day. Pretty good catch.
Yeah, and you've definitely got a sympathetic target there. Look, Russia's army will eventually fall apart. Under these conditions, no army is going to hold together. And there is an analog here. When soldiers on the ground in Vietnam realized by about 1968, 69 that this war was not winnable, American troop combat efficiency fell apart in Vietnam. It fell apart. People were smoking dope out of their shotguns, right? It didn't work. And that was the American army. Now you put yourself in a position, now you're a Russian soldier. Soldiers in Vietnam got fed. They got rotated. They got medical care. They They got the GI Bill. They got VA medical care. They got all of that, and morale and combat effectiveness still went down. We, as Westerners, it's almost impossible for us to understand the suffering, the discontent, everything that's going on in the Russian armed forces right now. These soldiers realize this war is unwinnable. They know that when they get an order to assault a target, that chances are very good that they're all going to die. You just can't keep doing that, right? You don't win the Peloponnesian Wars if you treat your troops like that, right? You just don't. You don't get Spartans by treating them like dogs. It doesn't happen. So there were vicissitudes in this war. It's going up and down. But look, do not abandon hope, because if you are rooting for the Russian army to turn itself around and this summer drive on Kyiv, it is never going to happen, Alan. It is not.
It's never going to happen. What you can be sure of happening is the next unexpected event. We don't know if it will be unexpected decisions made by Donald Trump. We don't know if it will be unexpected surrenders of these demoralized Russian soldiers on the zero line, quite possibly in Pakros or Toretsk. Because unexpected events are unpredictable, they have occurred so often in this war. You wake up in the morning and you're quite taken aback some days. As actually I was this morning reading of that massive Russian air attack overnight on Ukraine. I knew that Trump's decisions had opened such a window for Russia. But, almost 200 attack drones, almost 70 missiles. That's a big attack, did some damage. Missiles and drones did get through. It'll happen again tonight. And I'm sure that the Mirage jets, the F-16s, will once again be scrambled by the Ukrainian Air Force, flown by Ukrainian pilots, engaged in an air defense role. It's also why Ukraine's advances with electronic warfare have become so important in defending its cities. If you can throw an incoming Russian zone off path, then it's one less drone you have to take down with an air defense missile. So we're going to keep our eye on that, Chuck, overnight. I want all the viewers here, if they possibly can, to share indications and warnings with others. If you value the discussion, if you value Chuck's analysis, which I valued for 3 years of this war now, bring others to indications and warnings. Give us a like. Remember to subscribe. And please do remember to put your comments into the comments section of indications and warnings. Chuck and I read them next week. If you have questions, next week will be the week where we finally get a live YouTube stream going, so you can ask your questions in real time as Chuck and I talk about events on the zero line. I'm quite excited about that opportunity, Chuck.
Yeah, looking forward to it as well. That's where we like it the most. You get to guide the discussion, and we are happy to talk about what you want to talk about. And it really is, folks. It's for the algorithm. It helps, and it helps spread the word. Believe me, it doesn't cost you anything. We're not going to show up in your mailbox. We just give us a little bump. But thank you so much. And Alan, thank you for another great show. And we'll be back, folks, pretty soon, and looking forward to next week.
Thank you, Chuck. It's a challenging day to say Slava Ukraini, but That's what you have to believe.
Yep, and we do. Heroim Slava. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Chuck.